Welcome to the Ballet Help Desk podcast. My name is Jenny, and I am joined by my co-founder, Brett. We are both proud ballet moms who met backstage at our children's recital. During our kids' training, we found that resources were limited, and we relied on dance magazines and fellow parents in the lobby for information. Now that our children are embarking on their professional careers, we are excited to share our combined 20 years of experience as ballet moms with all of you. We will be bringing in experts to help make sense of this complex world of ballet training. Today we continue our series on ballet competitions with the incredible James Fayette and Jenifer Ringer. James Fayette retired from New York City Ballet in 2005 at the rank of principal dancer. James founded and managed an independent touring group of dancers which toured both domestically and throughout Italy from 1995 through 2002. In addition to setting choreography and coaching the dancers, he organized all aspects of the company. Throughout James's career at New York City Ballet, he was the union delegate and participated in all dancer employment contract negotiations. Following retirement from full-time performing, he was recruited by the Dancers Union to become a New York area dance executive for American Guild of Musical Artists, representing professional dancer employment nationwide. His approach to resolving problems between companies and artists earned him a high level of respect throughout the professional dance world with both artists and their managements. James holds a Bachelor of Fine Arts from St. Mary's College of California. Jenifer Ringer, a native of Somerville, South Carolina, enjoyed one of the most celebrated dance careers of her generation. Promoted to principal dancer of New York City Ballet in 2002, and danced feature roles from almost the beginning of her professional 24-year career. She performed in almost every major American city and around the world. In February 2013, Jenifer was appointed the artistic consultant for Dancing Dreams, a nonprofit dance program that gives New York City metro area children with physical challenges a chance to dance. In this role, she had the privilege of teaching these young artists to both movement and choreography and arranged for them to attend performances at New York City Ballet, where they were able to meet and talk with professional ballerinas. She also successfully recruited important fundraising support for the organization. In addition to teaching master classes at a variety of dance schools and institutions, Jenifer had been invited to be a regular guest teacher for company class at New York City Ballet, and in 2012 was appointed to a teaching fellow at the School of American Ballet. Jenifer also worked internationally as an assistant rapporteur for the Jerome Robbins Foundation, setting choreography for the National Ballet of Canada, Royal Danish Ballet, and San Francisco Ballet. Jenifer has been an outspoken advocate for healthy eating practices and shared publicly her struggles with and recuperation from disordered eating. Her book, Dancing Through It, My Journey in Ballet, was released through Viking Press in February 2014. Jenifer graduated summa cum laude from Fordham University with a bachelor degree in English. So let's jump right into the episode.
Hi, and welcome back to the Ballet Help Desk podcast. I'm Brett Gardner, and I'm here with my co-founder, Jenny Wong. And we are fortunate enough today to be joined by Jenifer Ringer and James Fayette. They are former professional dancers with New York City Ballet. They are also former deans at the Colburn School in Los Angeles. And we could not be happier to have them join us today. So thank you so much to both of you.
Thank you for having us. We're happy to be here.
Thank you very much.
So let's dive right in. Today, we're talking about ballet competitions and trying to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit on some of the things that are associated with that. So could you start by giving us an overview of how you view ballet competitions as it relates to overall ballet training?
Sure. Well, why don't I sort of start, and Jenifer will sort of dovetail with some of the things that I'm talking about. So the ballet competition's a fantastic tool. It's a great tool for training because you have to sort of pick a solo, you have to develop that solo, you get coached in that solo, and then you go and you perform it. And then you get wonderful feedback from hopefully experts that have been selected to be sort of judges. And I think we're going to talk a lot about some of the benefits of competition. But I think the overarching thing that I'd like to say about competition is moderation. You can't be the competition and success in the competition can't be the goal for your dance training. It's got to be one of the tools that you use to sort of develop yourself as an artist, develop your technique, and get great feedback. If it becomes the end goal, then it starts to get distorted in your art form. And just in closing on my comment on that is very few dancers that I've known that have had success in their careers or have gone on to do other things, they don't identify themselves as saying, oh, I won this competition or I won that competition. That's just part of a longer collection of experiences on the resume that sort of informed their entire career. So it might seem really important right now at 12 to 15 years old, but it gets watered down as you continue your journey in dance.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. I think I'm not aware of people who put I won a ballet competition when I was 13 on their dance resume. What advice do you have for parents as their students are preparing for competitions at the beginning of the school year, especially for parents where this might be the first time their kids are doing it?
For me, I think I would say that parents could, I think what a healthy way to look at competitions would be is what are the students' goals for the year? I think sometimes sitting down with the child and saying, are there particular technical things you're trying to get stronger at? Is there something you want to work on? Or even working with the child's teacher and saying, what is our goal for the student? What is the purpose for doing the competition? Is it performing experience? Is it to get stronger with our jumps? Is it like having that kind of long-term overarching goal and looking at it as an experience in order to enrich the child so that it's not so focused on, I'm going to get this score and I'm going to win. And if I don't, I will have failed, but that it's more of a learning and an enriching process for the student to kind of enhance them and them as a learner and as a dancer and as a human. I think that would be the best way to look at the experience going into it. And I think that also helps the whole family, honestly, to have a good priority for like, how much time are they going to spend on it? How much money are they going to spend on it? What is the actual goal?
Sure.
For the benefit of the child.
Right. And it can take over your life if you're not careful. So you're also judges in addition to being educators. And I want to turn to when you are judging a ballet competition, what are some of the things that you just love to see from competitors on stage?
The thing that I'm looking for primarily is a confidence and a presence on stage. You can tell a dancer the very first time they step out on stage and take a position, that tells you a lot about how the next minute and a half is going to go. So that comes from confidence, and it comes from the confidence that is built up over the period of time training. It's not that moment that we're judging, but that moment tells us about like the past 4 or 5 months. And then their joy, their expressiveness, how they're engaging with the solo. Those are all sort of really important things. And then second to that, for me personally, every judge is a little bit different, but second to that, I start looking at technique and start looking at areas where they might sort of look for improvement, and we put in our notes comments about that. But it's the confidence and the expressiveness and the joy that they're showing that they actually want to be there.
And for me, I would say, a lot of it's similar things. It's attention to detail. I think that thoughtfulness that they put into it. A big, huge one for me is musicality. Their dancing has to have a relationship to the music. And sometimes when a student has worked on a solo for 6 months, there's like zero relationship with the music because it's just such a habit. So for me, that musicality and that the alive quality of being on stage is extremely important, because sometimes if it looks like, it's just too practiced, then it's not really a performance anymore for me. So that's usually one of the biggest things I talk about when I'm judging is musicality and really having the kids really listen to the music. It's the life. You want to see their spirit come out of their faces,
Yeah, can you talk about that alive quality a little bit more and what you kind of mean by that? Do you just mean like have some spontaneity in your movement, or because that feels so intangible, and when people hear that, it's like, how do I get that, right? So could you define that a little more, especially if your teacher is a very strict technician and you're focused very much on that?
Yes. So a lot of times, and so the teachers will work on technique because obviously they that is their job. But I think it's a lot of it. James was joking with me because he said, "You're going to talk about their eyes, aren't you?" But it is a lot of it is just it's their eyes. It's that performance. He was talking about the joy. We want to see the individuality and the uniqueness coming out of the student. And I think that's why musicality is so important, because that shows that they're actually paying attention to the moment. They're not just on autopilot and trying to get everything right. Art is not perfect. Art is not about being perfect. Art is about expression and beauty and individuality. So it's at a certain point, I believe that the students need to let go of perfection, or the pursuit of perfection. Still always pursue excellence. Pretty much you should never pursue perfection, but that's a whole other podcast probably. But it's pursuing excellence and keeping the whole purpose for performing, which is to bring joy to the audience. It's about bringing joy. It's about bringing life and expression. I think that's a very hard thing in competition, because students are taught to look at technique. But I think ultimately the moment and the expression and the joy is what's going to light up the performance and set you apart from other dancers.
Sure. And that probably makes it a whole lot easier to sit through 20 bluebirds when people bring their individuality to it.
For sure. Exactly. That makes you sit up. That makes the judges go, oh, this dancer is actually in the moment. I don't have to really sit there and fixate on pointed feet. I can actually look at them and find out who they are by watching them dance.
On the flip side of that, what are some no-nos that you really don't like to see on stage? What are some things that people should really kind of steer clear of?
Sure. So they should steer clear of trying to. There's a desire to demonstrate how good you are technically. So dancers will take on a solo that might be beyond their abilities at this point in their training. That's, I would say, is a no-no. You're not going to score points by trying to execute unsuccessfully a step. You want to be dancing at the level that you're at. That's not to say that you shouldn't be working on the solos in the studio and constantly trying to achieve something. But when you get to a competition, you have this stage experience. The stage might have some challenges. You have tons of people around you. You have lights. You got the judge. You just got the energy, the performance energy. All those things are huge variables and factors that are going to impact your performance. And then you're not in control of them. So you want to be in control of your confidence and your ability to do that solo successfully. The area that we see this being a challenge the most is point work. Some dancers are putting on point shoes for solos that they're not really practiced at yet. So choose point shoes, no point shoes, and what level of dancing you're doing in those point shoes very carefully.
One other thing I'll just add to that is sometimes dancers will choose solos that are just too mature for them. Choose age appropriate solos. And also another solo that I see performed sometimes that I just don't think serves the dancers well is that there's a La Bayadere solo, I think it's Nikia, that her death scene, or it's just, there's not much dancing in it. And so when we see it, there's not much to judge. There's nothing that she does really. And so, I would say that's another no-no, because you do want to show what you can do.
Right. Or if you do that solo, because a lot of time, at least in YGP, where I think we have the most experience, if you're going to do that solo, there should be another really technically challenging solo that you do in addition to that, because a lot of times they can do two solos, sometimes more.
So how do you guys feel about that, someone doing more than one solo? Because that is something that we get asked about a lot, and people talk about, like, why do people do more than one solo at a ballet competition, other than, they have several rounds and things like that. But, at YGP, you can do more than one. Why do you kind of see that happening? Or what's your thought on it?
I think that if you're looking at the competition as a performing experience, I think sometimes families probably want more experiences. I think, give the child the opportunity to do more than one solo. I've definitely seen some where I thought they did too many. I don't think you need to keep coming out with everything. I think that's also a lot. I think that the opportunity to do more than one is sometimes nice for a student, because they can show a more lyrical solo and then a more pyrotechnical solo or something like that. I definitely see the benefit if your child does contemporary and classical to do one of each, because then they can do one of each. But I think overdoing it is not necessary. I don't think that that benefits anybody, frankly. And also that kind of they're probably in the studio all the time getting coached. I mean, I think that's probably too much for the child to be that many hours in the studio. But that's just my personal opinion.
I mean, you can't also, people think of just that performance weekend, that's really challenging. You have to anticipate all the training and rehearsals that are going into that. If you're working on 3 challenging solos that you need to do at the highest level, and you're working to sort of that top level performance, you're going to be putting yourself at risk of injury and just doing too much too soon.
So building on the multiple variations theme, the other thing we've seen, and some parents are curious about this, is that sometimes students will perform the same solo 2 years in a row. So they might bring it when they're 11, and then they might bring the same solo back when they're 12. What do you see as the advantages and disadvantages of doing something like that?
Well, first of all, I just say from the judging point of view, we see so many dancers. It's unless somebody's really standing out, or you might have a relationship with a teacher, or be aware of that student in some other way, it's really probably not something that's going to be remembered, or that's going to affect how we see it. For the student experience, I don't know, maybe Jen can speak to that.
Well, I can see, I mean, doing something twice in a row, I mean, you will be better and stronger when you come back to do it a second time. So there is, if it's something if it's a harder solo that you're looking to grow in, I could see the benefits of that. And then it's already in their body and they have the coordination for it and they've worked at it. So I can see the benefit to that if that's the goal. Probably I imagine some kids have done it maybe the first year when they're younger off point. And then the second year they come back to it on point. So I could see the advantage to that. The only danger, I think, in repeating solos too much is that then your body just has that one coordination. And so sometimes dancers are just, they might be great at that solo, but then if that's all they've worked on for 2 years, then sometimes coordination to do other solos, other dances, or even just classroom work drops off because they only have that one thing in their body. They don't know how to do other kinds of transitions or other kinds of steps out of that one particular step. So that's where then it's almost, it becomes just this rote routine and your body can only do it that one way. So I think that is a danger because then students could lose their well-roundedness and their ability to transfer to other styles or other series of steps.
Yeah, that's the one thing that we've seen, and we've heard other judges comment on this. You see an amazing solo and you will say that dancer is fantastic. And then you'll have them in a master class and they can't do a lot of the steps. And it's hard to sort of relate to what you saw on stage to what you're seeing in the studio. And I think that's the result of what Jenifer was just talking about.
And I think to that point, that takes you back to, you as a family sitting down and really deciding what is your goal for this competition. Because, for example, if you're shooting for a professional career, most companies, the audition is a company class, And so you want to make sure that you're still you have your priorities straight so that, competitions can be such a wonderful thing to give you so many great experiences and expose you to so many things. But you also want to keep your eye on whatever the goal is for the child. And if that goal is to end up auditioning for companies, you do also want to be successful in a masterclass situation as well.
Yeah. So again, going back to what I said earlier, competition is one of the tools that you have in your toolbox of many tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's a really great suggestion for parents to sit down and really talk about their goals, even with their coach, kind of plan out what they would like to achieve this year. What are some long-term and short-term goals for themselves? You guys are not the first people to talk about that, but I think the more people hear it, I think the better, because I do think that is such an important thing to set realistic goals for what this year is going to look like. So I appreciate you guys touching on that. Can we talk about something that really kind of hits a little bit of urban myth status? We talk about costuming. Like, how important is costuming? And can you really clarify the air for what the role of costuming really is in overall judging?
Sure. So, I mean, I'll start off talking about the fact that, I understand there's a concern. Costumes can be super expensive, and you could spend a ton of money on costumes. And we've seen some of the most beautiful costumes. I mean, I've seen more beautiful costumes in competitions than I've seen in major companies sometimes. If that's something that's important to you, it shouldn't. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a nice costume, but the most important thing is the costume needs to add to the dance and not take away from the dance. Some of the things, like if the costume has too much movement, I've seen tutus that just have a life of their own, bouncing all over the place, and you can't really analyze what you're seeing the dancer do. Costumes need to be just sort of clean and complementary to the dance and to the dancer. So they should be fit well. They should look nice, but that doesn't require, and they should be tasteful, and that doesn't require a ton of money. And it's just the other thing, and this is more kind of speaks to the contemporary dance. It needs to be sort of student and age appropriate. So sometimes the costumes get a little bit
Too mature.
too mature.
Sometimes, yeah. So I think choosing well for the age of your child. I don't think you need to spend a lot of money. I guess we can only speak for ourselves, but I don't raise a score because of a gorgeous costume. I'm looking at the dancing. But
Do you drop a score because of a poor costume?
I never have. No, I don't think so. I mean, I think the only time I've written a comment about a costume, and again, I didn't drop the score, but the only time I wrote a comment about the costume was it seemed like they hadn't put any thought into it at all. And so it seemed because I think the costume was really just a leotard and like a practice tutu. So it just seems like maybe they had even just, so I just said something like, maybe next time put a little bit more thought into your costume. It didn't affect my score because I really feel like my job is to judge the dancing and to critique that part of it. But I do think just showing that you've paid attention to it and put some care into it is important. That for me was the only time that definitely don't. Because I feel like families are all in different situations. Some people have access to somebody that can make a gorgeous costume. Some people financially can afford a gorgeous costume, but some people don't. And I'm not going to penalize the child for that. I think it's about the dancing.
Right. I've never decreased the score because of costumes, but if the costume did detract from the dance, like in the description, the example of the bouncy tutu, I'll make that a note in the comments. Mm-hmm. But for your listeners, I also don't want to say that costumes are not taken into account by maybe other judges, but mm-hmm. these two judges, we sort of refrain from that impacting the score in any way.
But I do think just showing that you care about it is important because you're also showing that you respect kind of the environment you're in. You're being respectful to that you're displaying yourself to your best ability.
I like that you talk about making it thoughtful and represent the dance that you're trying to do and the character you're trying to portray.
And I do think also for the girls, they should wear, makeup and have, because I know there's students, I don't think they need to be like professional dancer stage makeup, but I think they should have some stage makeup on like what they would have in a normal school performance. I think they would have, because I do sometimes also see dancers come out with zero stage makeup on. And I think that, in my opinion, I think they should also attend to that. They should attend to their hair, attend to their stage makeup and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think that is a really beautiful tip for parents to really think about how you're overall presenting to, however many people are sitting on the jury panel who have never watched you before, and really present yourself as a full, clean product ready to perform.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So I actually would love to add something about stage makeup just to the parents that are listening out there. I as the parent of a boy who did compete for a couple of years when he was younger, go get a makeup session from someone. Go learn how to help your kids get stage makeup on. Because I know when I first did it, my son came out on stage at YAJP Regionals looking like a zombie. So, and I am not exaggerating when I say zombie. We just blew it. One of the other kids in his studio took one look at him and said, "I'll do your stage makeup the next time." But parents, go to Sephora, go somewhere and get a lesson on how to do stage makeup, especially for the parents of boys, because we have absolutely no background in this.
Right. And I mean, that I couldn't recommend it because I've never actually watched one all the way through, but it looks like there's tons of like videos out there on how to do
Probably
stage
there's
makeup.
probably at this point there's a tutorial out there.
The main thing
There-
is getting the right shades, because we just went to the store and bought makeup and it was like 6 shades too light. So
Oh, that's
he literally looked like The Walking Dead. So I cannot recommend that enough to parents whose kids have not done this before, to learn how to do stage makeup the right way.
Right. And it's it's one of the skills that you need. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like how to sew point shoe ribbons and
Yeah.
how to do all the other things in dance. It's definitely one of the things that you should be learning how to do if you're going to pursue this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think my daughter started doing her stage makeup when she was 11 or 12, mainly because I was not great at it. And so she was like, Mom, really stop. Please don't do this anymore. And as a pro tip for parents who have, my daughter's multiracial, and during the season, she turns different shades. So please go and re-up their makeup and don't keep the makeup from December for the makeup in July, because it's very different. Okay, so to advance to finals at YGP, you need at least a score of 96 on your classical variation. However, some students with a score below that have advanced. Who makes that determination and what is it based on?
Sure. So, I'm going to comment maybe a little bit around this question in a sense to say that our experience has been that the judges that they put on the panel have wonderful diversity. You'll have people that are hardcore old school classical, either from Russian or from ADT. You'll have maybe more the neoclassical, New York City Ballet pedigree, like Jenifer and myself. You'll have contemporary dancers and modern choreographers. So you'll get a really wonderful spectrum of comments, notes, and scores. And that's wonderful because it gives dancers that might not show in some scoring, give them an opportunity to show very well in scores. I also imagine that this probably creates sometimes a little bit of a complication when they're kind of narrowing down and moving to like the finals or whatever is the next stage is. So once we submit our score, and also it should be clear that everyone does their scoring individually. It's not like everyone's powwowing during the solo. It's like a minute and a half solo, and you're writing as much as you can, giving the best score, and then you're either putting it in the computer and it's gone, or you're handing it down the line. And everyone's sort of doing this in their own kind of private thing. Once those scores get sort of collected, we don't really have that much involvement. And so, whether somebody is getting in without a 96 or not a 96, I don't know if we can really sort of speak to that because we're not really part of that process. But I do want to say that the diversity of judging, I think, is a wonderful thing, but probably also a complication.
I think we are also given that same information that 96 is what is required to go to New York. Yeah, I guess I can't really add anything to that. I feel the same way. I know the first couple times I judged, I wished that it was more of a collective thing, but if you do your own thing, and I do think that sometimes there is a great disparity sometimes because it's a subjective, everyone has their own background and they're looking at different things in the performers, and that's why they have a panel.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And you make a good point about the diversity of the judges. That was something I hadn't really thought about, but you're right. It's always a real mix of backgrounds that are judging these things. So I want to turn to scholarships, because this seems to be like this big mystery. And we see competitions publishing page after page of scholarships that are awarded at ballet competitions. Can you talk about how all of this works and kind of pull back the curtain a little bit on it?
Yeah, I wish we could give some more information on this, but our experience is that judges will come from different institutions.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be somebody from an important school or somebody from an important company, an artistic director or director of a school. And that school says, hey, here's, we have 7 scholarships for our summer intensive. And they'll actually come like with a packet of, offers. And they're going there to sort of judge primarily. And if they find somebody that fits what they're looking for either their school or their company or the summer intensive, they'll have the opportunity to offer. So I've been at YGP judgings where there's nobody that has a relationship with an institution that is looking to give out scholarships. And I've been to competitions where there's actually schools with multiple people and they actually are competing, trying to sort of go after the top students to sort of offer a scholarship. So I think it's a pretty wide spectrum. I mean, you're asking to sort of pull back the curtain, but unfortunately, I think it is sort of cloaked in individuality, who's actually there at the judging. You got to keep in mind that the judges are not employed by these competitions. These competitions have relationships with these judges, and they're all involved in the field in different capacities and different stages in their career and whatever it is that they're doing. And they invite them to come, and if they're available to come, they come to the thing. And they're trying to fill judge panels for many, many cities all across the country. It's a pretty complicated logistical challenge that they're doing. So you might have judges that come with multiple scholarship offers. You might have a panel of judges that are just not associated with any institution that has anything to offer. So
we never came with scholarships for Colburn, for example, when we were working there. We just we didn't come in that capacity, but I think some people do, and I do think it depends on what their school needs also, because I do recall a judge saying that they were coming from a particular school and they had, scholarships for 2 boys, but none for females, and so sometimes it's also what the school needs and what they're looking for, looking to recruit.
So it sounds like with everything in ballet, it depends. It really depends on the school. It depends on the current situation. It depends on who's coming to the who's performing. Is that right?
Yes. And for example, and if the judge is in 3 cities, maybe by the time they get to the 3rd city, they don't have any scholarships left.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think it is subjective, and
we hear that word over and over again in ballet. We hear the word subjective so often. And I think if there's nothing else that we can convey to parents, that everything in the ballet world is subjective. It doesn't mean your dancer isn't good or is the best dancer on the planet. It just depends on the day and the judge and the performance and essentially which way the wind is blowing that day.
And I think, again, that's such an important thing for parents to also know and to also communicate with their child. And also for them to have, what is their overarching goal? What's the learning experience that they can get from it? Not to get too deep when we're trying to talk about something else, but reminding the child that, their value is not attached to their score that they've made in the competition. Their value is not diminished if they're not offered a scholarship. They are precious and of immense value no matter what. And it's about the effort that they have put into the work for this competition. It's about the performing experience. It's about the relationships that they make and, the kindnesses they can give to their fellow students and learn from the master teachers, just having that broader goal, because I think it's so easy to focus on what's my score and did I win a certificate and did I get a scholarship? And then it's just so easy for the child's self-esteem to just start going down, down, down. And the whole point of the competition should be an enriching, growing experience.
I think that's a really good point, which leads to my next question. So my son did YAGP once when he was 11, and he'd been doing ballet for a few months. He came out of a jazz and tap and hip hop competition school and had been doing ballet, and his teachers took him to YAGP, and he made it to finals. It was really interesting when he got there. He realized he was okay compared to the other boys, but he saw a lot of the older boys and thought, wow, they are fantastic. And so one of the things I always told him was competitions are a really good opportunity to see where you fit in the overall ballet world. It's not 100%. It doesn't give you 100% gauge on where you fit in, but it's a kind of a good proxy for it. Can you talk about how using competitions, if you're interested in dancing professionally, how competitions can help you kind of figure out where you fit into that overall ecosystem with other dancers your age?
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. Going to a competition or just being around big groups of dancers in general.
Mm-hmm.
The same could be said for summer intensives, which was a huge eye-opener when I was a student. There wasn't a lot of competitions, hardly any, when I was coming up. But when I went to summer intensives, I'm like, oh, that's what I should be doing. That's the level I should be doing. And it sort of questions you. And then all of a sudden, you and your family start going around and saying, well, am I at the right school? I've been at the right school because I got to this point, but what's going to get me to the next level? So you can start taking a look at what your plan is, what your goals are, if those goals are really achievable. So I think that's really important. So if you do get the opportunity, I know there's all kinds of different rules about how you can view, but if you can see other dancers and kind of sit in the audience or have people that are invested in your career observe other students and other schools, I think that can be really helpful and informative. Having said that, I think there's also something that's interesting happening in competitions where people are traveling long distances to go to competitions because a school will be based somewhere, like say in the middle of the country, but then they'll go to like a coastal city for a competition because they don't want to compete against their fellow students. Or they might hear that, oh, that's maybe a newer city that competitions haven't been in that city, so the competition might be a little bit different. And I think that sort of skews kind of what's around you in terms of the level, because you might be sitting there and saying, okay, I'm feeling like I'm pretty much in the median here, or I'm feeling like I'm pretty good. And then some phenom will come out of nowhere because they flew halfway across the country to sort of get there, and they're trying to sort of, game the system a little bit.
Never thought of that.
I mean, again, so I would just go back to my original statement that says, listen, it's about moderation and using this as a tool. If your goal is to win a competition at 15 and that's your peak as a dancer, then that's probably a little bit disappointing. If you're using it as a tool to become a better artist and then you go on to be fulfilled for the rest of your dancing years, then that's great.
Several people have talked about and described the best thing about competitions is the networking opportunities. What's your opinion on this?
I definitely think I would say a yes to that. I mean, I think it's an opportunity to, well, I mean, we neither one of us did competitions, but I will say that we, just from the summer intensives we did and growing up as students and being exposed in that way, we now are connected to people that are all over the world working professionally in the field. I think that competitions is a great way to do that. I think they probably connect, and particularly with social media now, because you can get to know people and then stay connected with them through social media, and then just kind of stay in touch. And I think that is a good opportunity. I think also the master classes is a huge thing. I know sometimes the families don't stay for the master classes, which I never quite understood, because in my opinion, I think that's almost equally valuable to the performing experience, because you get to work with these teachers that are heads of school or major faculty members in schools or working with companies and second companies. And so just getting your face out there and being so that maybe when an audition comes down the line, they recognize you. They might not even know where they're recognizing you from, but they recognize your face. They recognize something about your dancing. So I do think it's really valuable if you're looking to do it as a career for your future. I think the master classes are hugely valuable. Also, just getting to know seeing other students and other teachers, as James said, when you have that thought, maybe I'm not at the right school, I think understanding how other teachers teach and seeing how they interact with students and how they maybe train them is also highly valuable. So if you're in the position where you're kind of looking around and trying to decide where the best place is for you to train, I think it can be very valuable for that.
Right. And so another thing that we sort of experience, and I'm going to sort of toot the Balanchine style horn a little bit. We've had a lot of dancers, in a variety of situations, but also through competition, is they've never been exposed to Balanchine, which is a very different way of dancing. And they might have had like maybe the more traditional classical Vaganova style, which can sometimes feel restrictive for a dancer. And then they'll go and they'll take a class with a Balanchine focused teacher, and it'll sort of expand their mind. That doesn't mean that they're going to just jump ship and go completely different, but it'll say, okay, well, I want to explore this. And it might end up, I have seen a lot of dancers sort of shift tracks because they've found a little bit more joy in a different style of dance, and really in both directions.
Out of curiosity, why is there no Balanchine rep in ballet competitions? Is it simply just because of licensing, or why is it?
Yeah, I think, it was ultimately it's licensing. But I believe, and I don't know this for a fact, but I've been told, and there's so many like anecdotes about George Balanchine that I've heard, and he said one thing to one person, something to the other. But I've been told that Balanchine was kind of against competitions, that it sort of detracted from the art form. And maybe at that time he was right. I think that competitions actually have evolved, and it's a disappointment for us to not see balancing solos in competitions. I would love to see it more, but I think that's a decision that they made, and they haven't really sort of changed their position.
Yeah, but just to go follow up on the masterclass and just the balancing style technique, like if James and I give a masterclass, we do the balancing style technique just because that's what we know, that's what we're experts in. Every company today, even the Bolshoi, dances balancing. And so it's a great way to be exposed to something that you might not normally get as a student where you are. So highly recommend masterclasses to the students. Families that are listening. Yeah.
I didn't realize there were a lot of people who didn't come to master classes. I didn't realize that a lot of people skip them.
Yeah, no, sometimes it's really surprising. We'll come to the masterclass portion and the classes are a lot smaller. It's definitely not everybody stays. Definitely not. And of course that might just be because they need to get home for school, whatever. But
and just also sort of to say one more comment about the networking is, I felt like when we were coming up as students, the networking and the information was a lot more genuine and authentic. I think there might be a little bit more misinformation out there. Mm-hmm. So you should be looking at really helpful resources, maybe, a help desk, the dancer help desk, to validate the information that you're taking a look at.
You raise a good point about the master classes. And Jenny, I noticed the same thing at regionals, that dancers a lot of times would drop out and not go to the master classes. And one thing I want to make really clear to parents is there's a perception that there's nothing in it for the student in the master classes because most of the slots and the scholarships are awarded at YAGP finals. But James, you made a really good point that they may recognize a face. And so going to master classes, even at regionals, is important because you never know when you might come across that teacher or that judge again in your ballet career. And if you're 12 and you go to a master class and then you see that judge for a summer intensive audition when you're 14, they may remember you from that master class. So that's the reason to go, not because there may be a scholarship attached to the end of class.
Oh, for sure. And I will say, just even personally, I mean, for us, the most personal interaction we have with the students is the master class, because the other times that we would see them as judges is that it's that 1 minute variation, and that is not a lot of time. And we're having to write comments the whole time. And so when you're in class with somebody, and I remember the kids that are looking me in the eye and really trying and learning and working on my corrections. And I also, unfortunately, remember the kids that are talking in the back and look like they would rather be somewhere else. And so, the teacher at the front room actually really does notice that and remember that. And so it's a great opportunity for these students to just show who they are.
It's always also wonderful, and this happened just yesterday. We were teaching at, and a student came up to us and says, "Oh, I don't know if you remember me, but you taught me at such and such location where there's a summer intensive or a competition masterclass." Mm-hmm. And it's a way that I immediately connect with that dancer, and then I'm going to be teaching them in that class. I know that's not for everybody. People have different levels of, confidence in going and talk to the teacher. But if that's something that you feel comfortable doing, and you did work with that teacher before, mm-hmm. going up to them before class and saying, "Hey, I took your class, and hopefully you'll say something positive like I enjoyed it," and then that teacher will be probably more likely to engage with you during that class. And I think that's a good thing.
It is all about relationships, because it's, "Oh, hey, I heard about this thing, you should go here." Or, "I really enjoyed your class." And after class, maybe you have a conversation of, "Oh, you might be a really good fit for X, Y, or Z school, or have you considered trying the balancing style or going to a summer intensive?" You need a village to make it down this path of ballet training. You can't do it as an island. And the more people and touchstones you have, the better.
Absolutely. And just one further point on that. I mean, James and I have written letters of recommendation for our students to different companies and heads of companies. And, almost always, we can say how great we think the student is till we're blue in the face, but technically and artistically, that director is going to be the one making that decision. He or she is not going to care if we think they're a great dancer, it has to fit for them. However, we have had the experience and the history with this student to say they're a hard worker, they're always on time, they don't have a bad attitude, they love to work, blah, blah, blah. And so these students in these master classes, again, they're forming an impression that over the years can be very important for them for their future.
So that actually leads to the question that gets thrown around ballet competitions all the time. And we hear parents complaining about results. And usually it's something like, well, that dancer wasn't nearly as strong on stage as my dancer. How come that dancer did better or passed through to finals? And there's this perception that results are preordained. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I do not, I have not in my experience at all of thinking that it was preordained in any way. Like we show up at the competition, we sit down, we get our judging material, like the computer program or the paper or something, and the curtain goes up and there it is. And we judge what we see. And again, that whole thing is subjective. I mean, I do think that judges are going to have different opinions and different things that they're looking for. I'm looking for musicality. Somebody else might be looking for turnout. I think turnout is important, but I actually put musicality on top of it. But so other judges might have other opinions. No, I don't think it is predetermined. I think that people go there and that it's in the moment. That's my experience.
Right. And I would go back to my previous comment about the diversity in judges and the diversity in the panel of judges. First of all, every panel has different backgrounds, different judges from different backgrounds. And every city has a different panel of judges for the most part. And so the experience could vary pretty dramatically based on who's sort of sitting there in front of the clipboard or the computer making the determinations. The other thing is that I can say, and I think this is pretty consistent from what I've heard from other judges, it's definitely for myself, is there's almost like three broad categories that dancers come in. Like in the first 15 seconds, I know if this dancer is in sort of a lower category and really needs to sort of be working, and it's great that they're doing a competition, but they're not going to be seriously considered this year. Then there's the middle category, which is a very wide category, and that's the most challenging one. And then you have the real standouts. So you can determine in the first 15 seconds if they're a standout or if they're in sort of the lower category. But when you get into that middle category, there is sometimes very little variation between two similar dancers, and it's almost hard to distinguish them, given the limited tools and the limited time that we can analyze them. I mean, if we could, work with them for a week and have several classes and coach them ourselves, I could totally pick apart and sort of, put them. But in 1.5 minutes, I can't tell you if an average dancer 1 is better than average dancer 2. And I think that's where you're running into some challenges, because I think once you get into sort of the top echelon, it's pretty clear who is really fantastic, who's average, and who needs to sort of continue working.
I think, again, I always keep going back to, just because I hear the frustration from the parents. I think the parents are feeling frustrated because they're like, the parents just want some kind of criteria so they can know, like, what do they have to do and all this stuff. I mean, again, I do think it's just so important for them to understand that, like, winning is really not the goal. It shouldn't be, I don't think, the goal of these competitions. Winning or getting a high score and all that stuff, because if you're doing it for that reason, I feel like you're missing the whole point of it. And then you're just, what you're shooting for is just not the things that are satisfiable. Is that a word? Because I think that you won't be satisfied unless you get the absolutely top winning thing. But then even if you get that, what at the end of the day, what you want is for your child to improve and be enriched, right? At the end of the day. And sometimes winning actually isn't the best thing for that child. And I can tell you, like, for myself, I would have been a horrible competition dancer. There's no way I would have survived in those conditions. And my strengths would not have shown in a competition at all. So I'm glad I never tried, because I might have actually completely failed and lost, gotten discouraged, and stopped dancing. And so I think that you just really have to know what your personal goal is for the competition. But I really don't think trying to win it is necessarily the best way to go about it. Some students are great test takers, some students are not. And I just think there's different kids in different situations.
I think that what you just said is so important. And just to reiterate, parents and coaches really should know their child and that particular child and where they would best thrive. Because you're right, not everybody would survive and really thrive in that very, very competitive environment. And it doesn't mean they won't have incredibly successful career. I mean, Jenifer, you don't get a higher career than yours. Yours is aspirational for all dancers. I think that that's a really lovely statement, and parents should really take it to heart, because would you agree that you do not need to compete in order to have a professional career?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, you do not need to compete at all in order to have a professional career, for sure.
Yeah, agreed.
Talking about some of those more intangible parts of ballet competitions, what are some urban legends about ballet competitions that maybe you would like to put to rest?
I don't know if I know what the urban legends are.
Yeah.
What are some of the ones that y'all have heard?
Oh, some of the big ones are, that that the outcomes are predetermined, that that the bigger the school, the more likely they are to win. It's basically mostly around winning, honestly.
I mean, I guess the only thing I can say, and again, I would just be speaking for myself. I think I probably speak for James as well. I mean, when we do this, we really do go and we judge what we see on stage, and that's just what it is. So,
Also, we see a major effort to be equitable and fair, and even increasingly so every year. There's more sensitivity to the students, to the protection of how the students' emotions and mental health and how they're doing it. There's a lot about like, hey, it's about just participation, and the experience is just being advanced more and more and more, and thankfully so, because it's so important. So we don't really see the negativity, and frankly, if we did see some of the things that are sort of out there in the ether being used, we wouldn't participate.
So what are some other things you would really like to see maybe evolve in the ballet competition world? You kind of talked about the mental health and the sensitivity. What are some other things you would maybe like to see change or move forward a little bit?
I mean, I guess one thing I do wish sometimes when we go into judge that we didn't just have a minute and a half. Sometimes the solos are so short, and it really feels like we don't get to know the dancers. And we do our best, but I would love to see like a more longer term opportunity. Honestly, I mean, so this is, I would love to have a certain kind of situation where we actually, where it really, there wasn't a winner necessarily. And I don't mean to take away the trophies, but I just feel like, I think winning is great, and having opportunities to like win something is great. So I'm not against that, but when we talk about the opportunities to teach these students and have the master classes and see the variation and then give them corrections for coaching and stuff like that, I would love to be able to do that in just an honest and genuine way to improve the dancers, so that the dancers are there, that it's really not about the score, that it's there to learn. I mean, I'd love to have something where we could just say, come, let's come for a week and let's show your variations and let's coach it and let's help you become better artists. I think that would be amazing. That totally doesn't answer your question though, because you're asking.
It does. I think you guys should start a ballet festival and do it that way. I think that would be amazing. And honestly, you are not the only judge to have said that to us, that they really would love to have that. Take the competition out is the wrong thing, but really work on the process and help evolve that dancer much, much more, rather than, focus on just the minute and a half variation. No, you are not the only one. So maybe you guys should think about it.
Right.
You can come on here and promote it.
You're right.
No, I mean, I think what you said is exactly right. Better engagement. I mean, again, I would just sort of, what you guys are doing is fantastic. Is being able to, so there's this opportunity. You have all these dancers, all these families, teachers coming to a location for this competition, which in the competition should be primary and upfront. But is there a way that we could continue to educate and, inform families and people about how to best engage with the art form? Because there's so many things happening. Some of it's not so good. Some of it's great and could be shared. And I think there's an opportunity because people are coming together about dance. I think it might be a missed opportunity to do more in that collectiveness.
I cannot thank you enough for saying those things, because I do think that parents really do need to think about that. And especially you talking about the goal is not to win. The goal is the preparation, the performance, and what you get out of it, and taking that next step in your professional career. We both have teenagers. You are parents of teenagers as well. As dancers, teachers, competition judges, what is your perspective of the role of social media?
So, do you want me to go first?
While you're forming your thought, I can just sort of comment one, because there's feeling or this need to develop your social media like you're some sort of product.
Yes.
And to sort of self-promote yourself. And there's this idea that says, oh, the only way I can get a job is to have a social media presence. That might be evolving. And I mean, I can't say that that's not the case, but I can say that it's definitely not the primary thing. It's like, if you're not doing all the other stuff and working on your artistry and really enjoying it and have that joy in your performance, the best social media campaign's not going to do, it's actually going to hurt you. Because we've seen dancers that I'm like, oh my gosh, the dancer looks beautiful. And they have, X amount of followers. And I see them in class, I'm like, oh, those are just really pretty poses. They really can't move. And that really hurts them, because then I'm saying, well, then they're really kind of sort of giving a false pretense. I will say that if you have, like, if all things are equal and you're looking at two dancers, and I'm talking about maybe like really high level institutions or definitely professional companies that are looking to sort of promote their brand and, get popular dancers in the organization. If all things are equal and you have two dancers the same and one has a higher social media than the other, that could be a factor to some schools. However, I would say,
or companies,
yeah, most likely companies. But I would say, is that the kind of company you want to work for that's going to pick you because of a social media thing? Because that looks like they're making a decision based on what's best for them, as opposed to what's best for the art or best for you. So those are just some of my sort of random thoughts on social media. Again, it's a tool. Moderation, definitely consider it as part of one of the many things in your toolbox. But you're not teaching and you're not training to become the next Insta famous or whatever the terms are these days for being popular on social media.
And I'll just add to that. I mean, I do think that there is an element where you kind of do need to have a little bit of a presence on social media, because I do think people like prospective employers are going to look you up. Professionally speaking, it can be useful for the parents possibly to create a dance page for their child when they get to a certain age, that they're starting to look for employment, maybe 6 months before or something like that. I could see that it could be a good tool just to kind of put it out there and show options, and the parent can curate it and maybe even do something like turn off comments or whatever, so that it's just a professional page. I think that I personally see so much danger in social media just for teenagers and how it affects their self-esteem. So I see a lot more dangers than positives to social media. So that's why I'm saying that for the parent to curate it and be in control of it, and maybe for the child to hardly see it, is possibly a good thing until it's time for them to be out on their own. The ones that are trying to get the 40,000 followers, we've had students that had a huge amount of followers, but it was actually very hard on them. It was hard on their self-esteem to have that many followers, because I think the feeling is that, well, they might all say they love me and they follow me, but they don't really know the real me. And I think that having a ton of followers is really hard. And I see a lot of pitfalls in social media. So that's why if I would recommend anything to parents, I would say curate something that's professional and appropriate, turn off comments, try to just make it about who this child is as a dancer, have some videos, have some, some pictures, and then just leave it at that. So that if they are looking for employment, the employer can find them, check them out, and be like, okay,
And you're at the service of these algorithms, and it's transitional, it's fleeting. Somebody might be really, pushed to the front and popular one month and then totally gone and off of the radar the next month. We don't even know if these companies are going to be around in 2 years. And if you're devoting so much of your resources, time, energy, and emotion to developing this, and then poof, somebody turns off one of these companies, what are you left with? Hopefully you're left with something that's beautiful in the studio and on stage.
I would also add, I think this is all really, really helpful for parents. one of the things we tell parents is, and having worked in corporate America, I would look everybody up that I was going to hire. So I would look at their social media, and it can also work against you. And so one message we always give parents is, and also dancers, is be really careful what you're putting out there, because the internet is forever. And if you put things up on your social media pages, even if you delete it, it's probably not going away. And so just in terms of managing your reputation, it's really important to be careful about how you're presenting yourself to the public, especially when you're starting to look at going into company affiliated ballet programs, or even going into your first job, because people are going to see that, and you really want to put your best foot forward.
For sure. Yes.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah.
I want to turn to some questions we have from our listeners. And so we've asked you a few of them already, but we're just going to kind of go through these in rapid fire. The first set of questions from listeners have to do with scoring. And I know we want to get away from talking about winning and placing and all of that, but we got several questions just around the scoring specifically. So scoring seems to be a bit of a mystery in YAGP. What is a good score, average score, or low score? And what's the lowest score you've ever given?
I think we sort of have to maybe plead the fifth on that one, because I believe YGP likes to keep that confidential. They're trying to manage expectations, and, they want and equitability. I think in effort to protect schools and protect individual students, they kind of keep the scoring a little confidential. Internally, we discuss it and discuss parameters, but I'm probably not for sort of broadcasting that to the world.
That's totally fair.
And I will say also that there's some people that tend to score higher, and some people that tend to score lower. And I've noticed that, and even I've noticed something. They're like, well, I tend to score in this range, and then somebody else will be like, oh, I tend to score in this range. And so I think it depends on the judge a lot of times, is what they think is good, what they think is average, and what they think is low. I mean, I think that each judge has their range that they're comfortable with.
Can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, one of the other questions we got is, do scores range widely, or are they grouped closely and winners are determined by tenths of a point, for example?
Well, I mean, I just go back to what I said earlier. I think most judges sort of put them in three buckets. You have sort of the bucket where the dancer really is not right this year and needs to keep working, the sort of larger average dancer, middle dancer bucket, and then the dancer that's fantastic. I think most judges score within those buckets pretty consistently, collectively. I mean, there's rarely disagreement on who's amazing. There's really disagreement on who's really sort of has some challenges that need to work on. Where the discrepancy can be pretty wild, is sort of like that middle bucket, where somebody might see something really special, and that's important to that judge. And somebody might say, well, I didn't see this, and so I scored them lower.
I have to say, I find it very difficult at scoring. And just so that I guess parents would know, I find it very difficult. There's sometimes that I'll sit there and, I'll write an 89, then I'll erase it, and I'll write a 90, and then I'll erase it, and I'll write 89. I mean, I find it really stressful, and it's really hard to quantify a dancer with a number. It's extremely difficult. And so I think, and you know how much value the students and the parents put on it. So it's just there. I think, again, one judge might love a particular dancer and the other judge doesn't, and it really depends on what their personal priorities are for what they see.
I actually think it's really helpful for parents to hear how difficult it is for you to really want to give what is best for the student and give them feedback. So focus on the feedback rather than the number, because the feedback is from the sound of this whole conversation, that's really where you want dancers to focus, and not so much on the number, but also listening to you guys talk about how you really do agonize about where to place a dancer.
Yes. And also sometimes, honestly, how much feedback I give, it depends on how long the solo is, because like Bluebird, it's done. And you're like, oh, but then sometimes there's like a 2 or a 3 minute, and you can really get into it if you have a nice long solo. So,
yeah.
And then I don't want the dancer that did Bluebird to feel bad that I didn't say that many comments. It's just literally, I didn't have time.
Right. I can also say prior to COVID, we were doing handwritten notes and sort of submitting the paperwork.
Oh my gosh.
And then because of COVID, they had to go. They said we need to separate the judges for the proper separation. We went to the computers, and I can type a lot faster than I can write. And so now I'm able to. I love giving notes, and that's where I really sort of pour my energy in. And then the numbers are really kind of secondary. Again, I mean, they sort of like fall within those three buckets that I sort of talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Is that something you would like to see change going forward, is giving the judges a little bit more time between each solo so you could provide a little bit more feedback?
That would be amazing. But then I think the days would just go on and on and on. Like they would have to, I think that would, I don't know how they would do it, because some of those competition days are just, they're so long.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe have pre-selected comments where you can hit like 1, 3, 5, 7 that are like that you say a lot, right? Like, and then your notes section can be a lot shorter.
Sure.
So, what is a variation you wish dancers picked that is maybe not as well known and it's not danced very often? And is there a variation that you go, oh my gosh, please do not do one more of blank?
Then like there's this bucket of variations that they pull from, and I think there's you have to do whatever's on the list that's available. It's still a pretty long list. Again, it's if the student connects with that variation and can really show an emotion and an artistry in that variation, I could watch it 100 times and be okay with it. If the dancer that's like, if they're a really hard and abrupt dancer and they're doing this soft lyrical thing, and it's in contrast to who they are as an artist, that's always going to be a challenge to watch. So that's where like whether it's a little bit more challenging to watch versus less challenging or enjoyable to watch, is if the dancer can match with the intention of the variation correctly. And that really comes to the decision process and when you're thinking about what you're going to do and how you're going to work on it, and the whole thing, everything leading up to the competition.
And also, I do think that certain solos go in phases according to the zeitgeist of the.
Well,
because sometimes they're like 1 year it's Esmeralda and another year.
I was actually having a conversation. I didn't share this with you previously, but I was having a conversation with some people that had been doing judges, and I think it has to do with the winning competition that appears on YouTube. So somebody will win the Prima song, or somebody will win dancing, and all of a sudden everybody will start doing that because that's the video that's been out there, and that was like the winner of the people that placed top. So that, I think that informs the kind of cycles of variations that we have, and it'd be interesting to do a study on how, like, the internet and winning on the internet sort of informs choices.
Oh, but one thing that really does get me, that I would recommend parents fix, is sometimes the recordings of music that they use is extremely poor.
Yeah, performance. So whatever audio file that they're using.
With the audio file that they're using for the solo, I would recommend that they actually do make sure they get a good audio file. Because sometimes it sounds like a recording off of YouTube and it has flaws in it, and coughing in the audience that's not in the audience you're currently in, and so trying to get a good recording of the music, I think, is important.
And similar to what we're talking about, costumes doesn't really affect the score one way or the other, but is something. I mean, from us, I can't speak to the judges, but it's definitely something that we want to see that there's energy and effort put into it,
And I have made that note. I've said, I think you should get a better recording of this music.
Yeah.
If we could maybe shift to the contemporary category a little bit, contemporary is included outside of classic ballet. This dance style can be pretty broad. What specific aspects are judges looking for in a contemporary piece?
Well, number one, that they actually dance. I've seen contemporary pieces where it's so contemplative. They're trying to tell a story, and I understand it's probably a wonderful piece of art that they're doing, and they're holding presence on stage, but I have a job to sort of judge you on steps that you're actually executing successfully. And when you don't actually have any steps, then it's really hard for me to judge you. So you need to sort of hit certain points to demonstrate that you're proficient at doing certain things.
Sometimes for example, sometimes the dancer will spend too long. It's all floor work. So they're just kind of rolling around the floor. Or sometimes they're just stretching their legs and showing their flexibility. And so You need to have movement quality. Dynamics is always a big thing, showing the difference between soft and sharp, fast and slow. Transitions and movement. Obviously, they have to have an intention with their performance quality, but just a lot of times it just doesn't feel like they danced. The solo will end and there was no dancing.
Right. And what are your thoughts on acro?
It's impressive, but again, for me personally, I mean, seeing one or two things like that is great, but for me, it's not really dancing. I feel like it's more gymnastic.
Yeah.
But that's my personal opinion. So
again, I go back to sort of some of the comments we said before. If it adds to the dance, great. If
Right.
it's just sort of doing it for acrobatic sake, which we've seen, and so maybe even taking away from the dance, and you're just trying to show that you can do whatever back.
but you have that skill.
Yeah, then it's not interesting. It's gotta there needs to be a cohesiveness to the dance.
There is another urban myth out there that you must do contemporary dance to a song without lyrics. Is that true or not?
I don't think that's true. To a song without lyrics specifically.
Well, so I mean, for us, definitely not. It doesn't impact our judging. I've never heard another judge say, "Oh, I can't stand something with lyrics or without lyrics." There might be a challenge, like if there's not a cohesiveness. If the person's singing about something and you're dancing about something completely different because that's what you're good at dancing, that could be a problem. The one thing that I will tell you, and I don't know where this comes from, but sometimes they'll mouth the lyrics, and maybe that's because it's so in their head and they've sung it and they've like listened to it in the car, and you'll see them mouth the lyrics, and that's sort of distracting and something that that might actually, I might take a point or two off for that and comment on it. Again, cohesiveness, and it's all got to work together.
The only time it's ever rubbed me wrong was when it was almost kind of spoken word and the sound was unpleasant. It was like almost a soundscape with spoken word I just didn't like the sound. So I guess wanting to be, and I think that they were trying to make a point and they had a reason for doing it. But for me, it just was an unpleasant sound. And so I had a hard time with that.
I don't have a problem with that. I think sometimes that can be cool.
Yes, but your music choice.
Okay.
But this is why, it's subjective.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is why people love one dancer over another, because it's made for many kitchen table fodder for many dancers, right? Everyone has a favorite for a reason. Is there anything, we've kind of come to the end of our questions from parents. Is there anything that we have not covered that you guys would like to discuss?
I mean, the only thing is, it's sort of, I don't know if parents really care, but this is such a wonderful thing for the judges to get together and network with other judges. There's a lot of communication that's happening in the environment of competitions that I think is informing the art form, that's informing like what's being taught, and how that's impacting students. So there's a huge benefit, I think, to the field of dance. So there's a huge benefit to the field of dance that, these groups of people are getting together, and these experts in dance are getting together, and hopefully the field and the students in the schools are benefactors of all that.
Do you have any things that we haven't covered, Jenifer, that you would like us to cover?
No, I don't think so. I think that for me, I've said it a few times, I think the goal for parents should really be about just growing and enriching their child and just trying to remind their child, no matter how much maybe the school and their teacher is emphasizing the score and the winning and the high placement and all that stuff, just reminding their child that it's a growing experience, it's a performing experience, it's the opportunity to get feedback from professionals that are not their teachers, and it's and that their value and their identity is not attached to how they do at the competition, that it should be seen as something to benefit them, not something that's going to tear them down. I guess that would be the thing that I would hope for all these beautiful dancers that are taking part in these competitions.
I think that's a lovely place to end. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you giving us all of your time.
So happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
If you liked what you heard on this episode, please take a moment and help us spread the word. Follow us and leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Tell a friend and share on your social media. Also, now that your dancer has returned from their summer intensives, please head over to ballethelpdesk.com and leave an anonymous review of the program. Help your fellow dance parents by letting them learn all about the good, the bad, and everything in between. To stay in the loop on all of our latest content, subscribe to our newsletter at ballethelpdesk.com and follow us on Facebook and YouTube. Until next time, have a great day.